Welcome to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast, a place where backcountry warriors can share their stories of grit, service, healing, and wilderness adventures. I'm your host, Tom Walton, Marine Corps veteran, full-time cop, and aspiring hunting and fishing guide. Join me and others as we journey from the hood to the woods in pursuit of freedom in the outdoors. All right. Welcome to episode 16 of the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Tom Walton, and today I am joined by River Corcoran. River is from Sandpoint, Idaho. It's where, River, you grew up there, right? Is where you spent most of your life?
Yep.
Awesome. So River grew up, born and raised Sandpoint, Idaho. And for people that don't know where Sandpoint is, that's not far north of where I live in Coeur d'Alene. That's about halfway, maybe a little less than halfway from Coeur d'Alene to Canada. It's up in the Idaho Panhandle. So River started hunting with his dad when he was around 8 years old. Began hunting for himself when he was about age 11. He hunts just about everything from mule deer, white-tailed deer, ducks, small game, turkeys, and predators. He's also participated in a lot of elk hunts, but has yet to hold a tag for himself. River is passionate about traditional bow hunting, and he simply loves putting meat in the freezer, so he is not above pulling out a rifle or a shotgun to accomplish the mission. River recently began filming for the legendary winner of season 8 of Alone, which is Idaho's very own Clay Hayes. And River has also started a fast-growing YouTube channel that's outdoor-focused called All Things Wild. River, I am really excited, as I told you before we hit the record button, about getting you on the show. So welcome to the show, man. Like I told you, you are, I think, in a really fantastic time of your life. You're a young fella. You're motivated. You're putting out pretty cool content. Obviously, you've done well enough to get noticed by some cool people and get some really cool opportunities. So we're just going to talk about that today. So like I said, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. It's good thing you got going on. Good. Yeah. So I'm River.
Thanks,
been
man.
Hunting for.
So let's just.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I think I'm lagging a little bit.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead, man. Just jump on into it.
Oh yeah. No, I was just going to say...
Yeah, I think we got a little lag, but yeah, no, just jump right into it, man.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I'm River, and it's really laggy. Okay, I heard you coming back in a sec. I think it's my internet. I'm sorry to edit some of this out. There we go. Yeah, I'm River. Been hunting all my life.
Sorry,
and
that's what AI really, does that for me.
Oh, no, no worries. Yeah, and just enjoy hunting a lot. And what is going on? It came back in again. My goodness. No, yeah, it's a great time of year right now, though. Been hunting deer for the last couple weeks, and I actually just shot my first rifle deer. What was that? 2 days ago. But yeah, born and raised in Sandpoint, Idaho, and grew up hunting. And that was a great intro you did on me. But I'm down here in North Central Idaho interning for Clay Hayes, and my internship is actually coming to a close here in December, but I've got to do a lot of really cool stuff with Clay and experience a lot. We flew out to Alaska for his moose hunt and actually stayed there for a whole month, and so got to experience a lot of really cool stuff there and exploring the country a little bit more, and just, that remote, rugged part of Alaska where we were probably 50 miles from the Yukon River on the Anoka River, and yeah, but we've also got to do some elk hunts, and Clay's got a late muzzleloader cow elk hunt coming up in just a couple weeks that I'm pretty excited for. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of that stuff coming up, but it's great to be here. Thanks for the welcome.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like I said, welcome to the show. So, let's just kind of dive into all that bit by bit here, man. So, you told us you started hunting at a young age and kind of the things you like to hunt, man. What's kind of been your passion as far as species that you tend to gravitate to hunting the most, and what's that experience been for you? I know you're a passionate bow hunter.
Yeah, it's funny. People ask like, "What's your favorite thing to hunt?" And for me, whatever is in season is my favorite thing to hunt. Right now, my answer would have to be whitetails. Well, yeah, probably whitetails, just because. I mean, man, I just love hunting in general, but especially, you get into the rut like we're getting to now and do a little calling and you see those big old bucks starting to cruise and there's nothing that gets my blood pumping more than that. But I also really enjoy mule deer hunting. I've been getting into muleys a little bit more in the more recent years, and I like muleys because I feel like it's a very achievable animal to hunt with a traditional bow, which is what I enjoy doing. Just in the fact that they let you stalk a little more and let you get a little closer than whitetails typically do. But then again, also, springtime is one of my favorite seasons, and I do a lot of spring turkey hunting up in the Panhandle, and that's a blast too. So yeah, whatever's in season is usually what I'm going for.
I love that answer, man. Because I kind of tend to be the same way. I think I have not been hunting. I don't think as long as you. Well, actually, how old are you?
I'm 19. Yeah, I think you probably have been doing it a little more longer than I have.
I don't know, man. I'm obviously much older than you, but I didn't start hunting until I was well into adulthood. But I definitely have tended to be a whatever's in season kind of guy. I go back and forth. There's things I like about all the species. I definitely like whitetail deer right now for the same reasons, because the rut's kicking in. I'm seeing bucks cruising where I live, and I'm tagged out because I went and shot a mule deer this year. But my wife has a tag, so I'm making her go out so that I can hunt through her and enjoy the whitetail rut, which, just like anywhere else in the country, is a pretty magical time of year. And I think you and I met in person at one of our Armed Forces Initiative events at Pacific Game Calls in Post Falls, Idaho. We were doing like a turkey seminar with John White from Northwest Spur Chasers. Is that correct?
That is, yeah. It was great to meet you there, and it was an awesome event you guys put on.
Yeah, that was fun, man. John and I just love connecting with folks, especially for him when it comes to anything around turkey hunting. So, yeah, I definitely like turkey hunting too, man. I tend to think I gravitate towards mule deer these days as well. They live in such cool places. They're such an iconic critter of the West, and man, they're cool looking critters, and they live in tough places. And bears, really enjoy bear hunting as well, for all the reasons that bears are cool. They're just fun to watch. But anyways, man, well, that's really awesome. So you grew up in Idaho, and I imagine that elk hunting for you, I'm just kind of curious. It's not like you can't get a tag. So kind of tell us about your elk hunting journeys and what's it been for you? Are you helping people with their hunts, filming, and just haven't had a chance to go for yourself yet? What's up with that?
Yeah, I should have hunted elk by now. It's kind of funny, but no, honestly, I've had opportunities to get tags, and what it comes down to is, in the past, I've been very locked on to kind of hunting with my trad bow, and I think that definitely has its positive sides too, because I think just the experience you gain hunting with a weapon like that and having to get so close, makes you a better hunter. But I honestly have just not filled a lot of deer tags with my bow yet, just because it does take so much time and dedication. And so I've really just spent a lot of my time, that I would have been elk hunting, hunting whitetails or muleys. And I mean, like you said, mule deer, man, I do enjoy hunting whatever's in season, but if I had to choose one to hunt for the rest of my life, it would probably be mule deer, like you said, just because the country they live in. But man, just something about a big 4-point or something, and just that coat they got on them, and the way they live, and where they live, and how you got to hunt them, and glassing and all that kind of stuff. It just gets me fired up, and so I think hunting mule deer with a trad bow is pretty sweet. But yeah, my dad, he started elk hunting when I was probably, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14, and he's shot a bunch of cows in the past, and then our families, as we've gotten more into it, my brother, he shot a really nice bull this year, and so yeah, I think I was gonna get a tag this year, but then I kind of signed on to this internship with Clay, so I think next year is gonna be the year where I'm gonna get my first elk tag, and we'll see if I can put one down.
I love it, man. It's pretty cool. So when it comes to your trad bow stuff, man, noticed I was looking through your YouTube channel, and it looks like you've done some solo hunting for mule deer. Is that what I saw? Am I remembering that correct?
Yeah. The first hunt I ever did for muleys was a 7-day early season hunt with my brother, but I have done some solo stuff as well. There's a late archery season in Idaho, and I did that one last year, and so I found some mule deer on their winter range, and went out for a couple days. And on that hunt, it was I had kind of got myself into a little bit of a predicament there, because drove up into some rugged country, and I hadn't really been paying attention to the weather a whole lot, and I should have. But got into the ridge I wanted to camp on, and pitch camp, and I actually saw a 4 point that night, and so I had plans to try to get in there the next day and try to see if I could get close to him. But that night, the wind, man, I was on an exposed hillside, and I should have chose a campsite in a smarter decision, but or in a smarter place. But the wind just started going probably at 7 p.m., and it just blew all night and had snow coming in. And I woke up at 2 a.m. and my tent was just completely collapsed on me, and I had to get out and brush snow up, but brush about a foot of snow off. And so woke up the next morning, and just all my gear was just wet. And I could have stayed and stuck it out, but decided, since I was solo up there, I was going to pack out. And so I packed out, dried out all my stuff, came back the next day, and so then I decided I was just going to day hunt it for the last 2 days of the season. And this is in December, and I ended up seeing a what I would consider a nice 4x4, and really stayed on him all day. And I ended up getting into, probably, I think the closest I ever got to him was maybe 40 yards, maybe a little closer. But in that snow, at that time of the year, it was just to where it had a little bit of a crunch on it, and so you could stalk through there into somewhere around there 50, 40 yards. But then once you got real tight in with them, they get pretty aware to the noise of you sneaking in. And so I never was able to close those final few yards in to get a shot, but I stayed on that buck for probably 4 or 5 hours as he was hopping ridges, and moving back to where he was going to bed. And it was awesome just to hunt muleys in that way in that late season.
Man, this sounds pretty cool. I have not done that, so that sounds like quite an adventure, man. Sounds like maybe some lessons learned. What lessons did you learn on that hunt, man? Like, sounds like maybe picking a campsite.
Yeah, that was, I had done, I think, 1 or 2 solo hunts before then, but really that was the first solo hunt where I felt like it was like the real deal of solo hunting. And I had decent gear. I wasn't smart about where I chose to camp. I camped just on an exposed ridge that was pretty vulnerable to the wind. In hindsight, should have went to the backside where there was some timber. I think if I was back there, I would have been able to had a much easier night, and staying there for the next couple days. But then, yeah, just I think that's part of it too. You learn lessons and make mistakes, and that's the best way to learn. But definitely should have chose a different campsite.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And it takes a lot. I don't think people always realize when they listen to podcasts. Maybe they do. I don't know. But that they haven't gone out. Even guys that live here and they haven't gone out by themselves, man. Being out in the wilderness by yourself, especially in hinky weather, it can be pretty intimidating. So my hat's off to you for, 1, going out and doing it, and 2, going back and continuing to pursue that buck. It sounds like it was pretty cool. I bet we're going to see you post some nice buck photos on future hunts for sure. So pretty cool, man. What else? Any other good like trad bow hunting or just hunting stories in general, man? You got anything else that stands out as far as some of your hunts?
Yeah, I guess we could probably stay on the topic of mule deer, because that's something we're both passionate about. My intro to mule deer was that week-long trip my brother and I did in a similar area at the beginning of, what was that? I guess that would have been last year. Was it last year? Yeah. And so we did 7 days up there, at the beginning of the archery season, late August, early September, and that was where my spark for muleys really got lit. On that hunt, they're up way in the high country, and so it's a lot of glassing and a lot of just hiking and finding bucks. And we hadn't done a whole lot of scouting before that trip, so we were going in somewhat blind. We'd hiked into that basin where we wanted to hunt once before back in July, and we'd seen a good amount of deer sign, but we really didn't know if there was any good bucks in there or what the deal was. But we hiked in 2 days earlier, so that would have been August 28th, and I was packing in my my longbow, and my brother had a compound, and we packed in there. And the first 3 days of the hunt, we spent a lot of time glassing and a lot of time hiking to different vantages, and saw a lot of does, but never really got on a buck. And then midway through the hunt, we ended up finding a little bachelor group of bucks. There was a couple spikes and a forky in there, and so we were both pretty excited just to see legal deer. And so my brother tried to sneak in there with his compound, and he got to 55 yards, but eventually that was just a little too far for him, and so he let that buck walk, that forky walk. And so then we kind of just kept doing that thing, and for the rest of 7 days, and on the night of day 6, we had some weather come in, and it really got the deer up moving. And so it wasn't necessarily raining, but we just had cloud cover. And in that late August time frame, it gets really hot during the day. So we had temps in the 70s. That weather change really got deer up on their feet and moving. And so that night we glassed up 3 bucks. There was a big 5x5 in there, big heavy buck. There was a 4x3, and then I think another 4x4. And we saw them, and there was probably 3 hours of light left, and they were pretty close. They were 500 yards from us. That's not necessarily that close, but the way the landscape was, there were just one saddle. There was only one saddle between us, and so the wind was right, and it was at the end of the hunt. And we didn't feel like they were going to bed down because they were just up feeding, and they were up feeding in the evening. So my brother stayed back, and I started slipping in, and man, it was really fun because where we were hunting, it was in one of those old burns. And so you have that kind of a lot of that thick old timber, but it's been burned through, so you can really glass through it. And so I started slipping in, and I got to cut it down to like 300 yards, and then got a little closer, and eventually got into about 150 yards from them. And during that time, the big buck actually bedded back down, which I was a little surprised by. But eventually, once he bedded down, and the other two had kind of fed over to where they weren't directly looking at me, I sped up a little bit and cut it into probably 75 yards. And it was one of those deals where I didn't have a super good pinpoint on where they were, because they kind of went out of view for me. And so I was glassing up at the top of the ridge, which was only 100 yards away. And you do that thing where you're glassing, and then sometimes you'll bring your binoculars down a little bit, and then you'll be like, oh crap, there's a deer right there. And that was kind of how it happened, because I looked down, and that 4x4 was probably 50 yards from me. And so I didn't even have an arrow knocked. And so he was walking towards me, and I figured, if he's walking towards me, then those other two are probably going to walk towards me too. So got an arrow knocked and kind of got in position. And at that point, I ended up seeing the other 2 bucks come over the hill, and they all started coming towards me. And so, with them looking towards me, I felt like the best, move was just to stay put and try to position myself in the spot they were going to come by. And sure enough, there was this one kind of opening that was probably 35 yards wide and maybe 50 yards long, where there wasn't any timber. And I positioned myself on the uphill side of it, thinking they would maybe follow that top edge. And what they ended up doing was just kind of following the bottom edge, which was about 35 yards from me. And so, the 4-point, and then that 3x4 and the big 5x5, they all, just slow walked by at 35 yards. And it was one of those deals, man, where if I had a compound, every one of those deer would have been dead, but I didn't. And that's part of traditional bow hunting. I think that just speaks to traditional bow hunting, because you got to be willing to let a lot of animals walk when you're hunting with a weapon like that. And that's just part of it, But really, that trip just lit a fire inside me for muleys, and ever since then, any chance I get to go chase bucks, I definitely take advantage of that.
What a story, man. And my hat's off to you for being disciplined enough to not take a shot on one of those bucks, let alone the really nice big 5x5. Honestly, don't know if I would have had the discipline, but I don't have any traditional bow experience. So maybe I would if I knew my limits. I don't know what they would have been. Right now, my limits are 0 yards with the trad bow. But man, that's awesome, and good on you, dude. I can see how that would light a fire under you, and I bet you're dreaming about those bucks walking by you probably every day still. So good deal, man. Well, it seems you're filming a lot of this stuff, and so some of this stuff you could be found on your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. So that hunt, that's I guess what some people would call a full film. I don't know if it's a film. I think it's just more of a video, but that video's over an hour long, and I documented that whole hunt. And I didn't end up filming, or I didn't end up getting any really good footage of that stock, but I got a little bit, and so that's all in that video. But yeah, on the topic of filming, that's something that I'm really got passionate for, and that's where I would like to take my career in the outdoor space. And so that's kind of why I am down here with Clay, learn how he does things, is just to really get a more professional sense on how to do things. Obviously with somebody of the status and skills as Clay. But yeah, I started filming when I was probably, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16. So just not too long ago. And you obviously, you start with one of those tiny little Canon Walmart power shot things, and you take in video clips, and then you work your way up. And I think for my 16th birthday, I got a nicer Panasonic video camera. And so I started, taking video of my hunts. And obviously when I first started out, I wasn't anything good, but you're just taking clips. And I've kind of progressed to where I've been able to really learn from some masterful people such as Clay about it. And so I think with filming, it's all about that authenticity and that realness. And so one of the things that I've learned from Clay, and I've learned a lot from him, but one of the things is just the importance of capturing good audio, because that alone will do a lot for the experience of somebody watching the video, and just bringing it in that real authentic way. And I think that's, if I had to pick one thing that I want to be the best at, I think that would be it, of just documenting the hunt as it happens and being real and authentic about it. And I think that's important. And I think people enjoy watching those type of videos for sure.
I 100% agree with you, man. I talked about this with John just the other day, actually, and we brought it up on the last episode we did with Jagger. And one of the things that we talked about is it's not always about the shot, shooting an animal. I mean, it's a lot about the shot, and not about what animal you shoot, if you shoot an animal, but it's about the story and being real, right? We're not doing podcasts or filming hunts that's always about an animal we killed or killing animals and our trophy animals. I've been on plenty of hunts where I've gotten skunked. I've been on plenty of hunts where I shot an animal that you wouldn't consider a trophy. Personally, I'm a meat hunter, so I will pass on small animals until the end of my hunt or the season, and then I'm taking the food home and put it in the freezer. But John and I, we show misses, we show, or I should really say he. I don't want it to make it sound like I do a lot of this. I'm just kind of along for the ride with him. He's kind of my Clay. He's like my mentor when it comes to a lot of this stuff and just life in general. But, he'll show misses. He'll show hunts where we don't get into anything, super great. He'll make a story, because there's still a story to tell even when we don't kill. And sometimes, on his YouTube channel, Northwest Spur Chasers, we've shot some jakes, but we sure had a heck of a good adventure getting to the point where we worked hard to get to those jakes. And sometimes that's just the animal that's presented to you. So I'm really glad that that's kind of the route you want to go, man, that you're trying to be authentic. What is it about filming that really spoke to you? Why filming hunts for the outdoor industry? Like, what is that for you?
That's a really good question. I think when it comes down to it, there's a couple reasons. The first is a very practical reason for me, and this is something actually I encourage a lot of people to do, is just filming the shot. In terms of, I think if you have video of a shot, especially if you're bow hunting, but also if you're rifle hunting for big game, being able to look back at that shot, I think drastically improves your success rate in terms of finding that animal, especially if the shot is not ideal. I've had multiple situations where I've been hunting with friends or family, and we've taken rifle shots at deer, and that shot's just a little bit forward, or that shot's a little bit back, and you can really go back and play that video back in the slow-mo and find out exactly where that shot is. And a lot of times that actually leads to making a smart move in terms of, do we need to wait before we go and look for that animal? And then you end up actually recovering that animal because you had video. So I think that's one aspect to it. And even if you're just taking, phone video through a phone scope, I encourage people to do that, even if you're not going to film hunts, just for that reason alone. But then, in terms of filming hunts, I think I really enjoy going back and reliving those memories. And I think YouTube videos and making these videos of these hunts is a really great way to do that. Not only for the audience, but also for me too. Or even just family members. One of my favorite memories as a kid has been, sitting down and as a family watching hunting videos. As a family, we didn't have a TV growing up, and we didn't watch a lot of television. But we'd watch videos of hunts. And I've really enjoyed a lot of Clay's content, but also the Northwest Spur Chasers videos, and obviously the job John does is just unbelievable with his skill set in turkey hunting. And I think just yeah, I think those are the two main reasons that I do it.
Right on, man. Love it. That's good stuff. Um, so you've been filming for a while now. Obviously, you want to do it professionally, and along that road, you've gotten into contact with Clay Hayes. And again, I think a lot of people listening might know, but if you don't know who Clay Hayes is, he won season 8 of I think it's the History Channel show Alone. I hope I'm right on that. I don't know, sue me if I'm wrong, but the History Channel show Alone, it's a show where participants go in, like there's 10 participants. They go out into the wilderness. They're put out there. They're actually truly alone. They get 10 items to survive with, and they're supposed to be like survival experts. And it's the progression of the show has been kind of fun to watch because the first episode, people didn't last very long. They cried. They weren't actually survival experts. And then as time's gone on, people have gotten the show's attracted, I guess would be the way to say it. The show's attracted more talent in the survival realm. And Clay got on for season 8 and he just absolutely rocked it. He represented Idaho well. I know I was rooting for him the whole time. But what he's kind of highlighted for, at least what I remember him for in that show, besides winning, was taking that buck, that blacktail buck with his bow, stalking the woods. It was a really cool hunt, and obviously that extra meat helped push him that extra mile to be a winner. So that's who Clay Hayes is. He's a winner of a pretty good show, and to outlast that everybody else on that is actually a significant accomplishment as an outdoorsman, let alone just in general. I mean, that's real survival. So that's who Clay is. As much as I would love to talk about Clay, I really want to hear about you. Like I told you earlier, this episode's about you. So how did you get into contact with Clay? How did you guys intersect paths?
Yeah, I know you want to try to keep it on me, but I will say, Clay's a freaking awesome dude. He's one of the toughest guys I know, and I think just the kind of person he is just the kind of person you want to be around. But yeah, I met Clay, or I crossed paths with Clay back in, I guess we first got in contact in April, but I met him in June when I came out to intern for him. But yeah, he posted just on Instagram that he was looking for an intern, and I had been thinking about trying to do an internship with, I'd been thinking a lot about trying to apply for like the Hunting Publics internship. They're a Midwest YouTube channel focused on, whitetails. And I'd thought about applying for that, but it was really just a little further from home. And I felt like it was maybe too much for me to commit to. But then it was later in the year in April when Clay posted that he was looking for an intern. And obviously I'd watched all of Clay's content since I was really little, and I thought, you know what, this is just as good of an opportunity as I'm going to get. And it was a long shot for sure to apply. I didn't think I would get accepted, of course, and so sent him over an email, and I was lucky enough to be picked, I guess. Yeah, I've learned insane amount of knowledge from Clay. He's a super great dude, and I think the biggest reason I wanted to do the internship was just because I wanted to get a sense for how somebody would live life while doing YouTube full time. And I think he does a really good job in that, obviously, but just also seeing how he edits his videos, how he films them, how he goes about it, and his attention to detail with setting up shots and making sure lighting is looking good, and really being methodical with that edit to get a super professional sense to it. And those are all things that I've really learned. When we first started out, we filmed a video, and especially with the editing part of it, he told me, he's like, okay, I want you to edit this video just how you would. And I came back to him a couple days later with what I thought was a good video. And then, he gave me all this feedback back on it. And it was like, man, you're not going to get that from a YouTube video. I mean, you can learn things obviously from school or all these things. But I think if you're living it with somebody like Clay, and you're getting that one-on-one feedback on all these type of things, especially for editing and filming and stuff, that's the stuff that is really important. And so I've definitely progressed in my ability to edit and film when I'm hanging around a guy like him. But yeah, great dude, and I'm really happy and lucky to be here.
That's pretty wild to think about the way you just described your internship, because when I think of Clay, I'm thinking of hunting and fishing and survival. I'm not really thinking about all the work that he's putting into his YouTube content, and that he's probably a wealth of knowledge in how to produce a professional video. So that's kind of eye-opening to me. you guys are doing this for a love of the outdoors, but there's a lot that goes into making even a relatively short film in an outdoor experience that's professional, that's going to hold an audience's attention, and that a professional is going to be proud to put out there with their name on it.
Yeah, he does an insane job at it. And like you said, even with some of the shorter videos, if it's just a 15-minute video, you know, and he does a lot of stuff where it's like how-to survival stuff and bushcraft stuff, and even those videos they'll take a couple days to film and edit. And I think that that one of the things he told me, and I was telling him about my plans for 2026, and one of the things that I'm hoping to do and hoping to follow through with is, or I should say, am going to follow through with, is posting weekly on my YouTube channel for all of 2026, which is a big thing to do. And Clay over anybody else knows how that goes for sure. And so that's a big goal in and of itself. But one of the things he told me when I told him that was, he said that he would recommend that you post, or he would rather post, less videos that were quality than more videos that were lower quality. And I think that just goes to the kind of content he wants to shows the kind of content he wants to put out, because I think that attention to detail is what draws people to watching his videos. In all of his videos, there's good audio. The camera's stable in most situations. Obviously, sometimes, and there's an exception to that. But I think that was a good lesson for me, just hearing him say that, of just keeping that attention to detail and really keeping it professional while being still authentic, because I think that's a fine line. You don't want it to look overproduced. I think a lot of content now that people put out is overproduced, and that's all great, but keeping that authentic feel to it while still being professional is really important, I think.
Absolutely, man. You're right. And it has to be your story and your personal touch, right? It just can't be another copied image of what some other YouTube fellas are producing. And that can be hard to find. And I think, too, there's a little bit of growing in your content. As a podcaster, for example, I'm definitely kind of growing and shifting and getting feedback and making adjustments. I heard from a couple people like, hey, man, your solo episodes weren't really that great. It sounded like an audiobook. And if I want to listen to an audiobook, I'll get an audiobook. We want to hear more from guests. And so, I really liked my solo episodes. I guess I maybe I like myself too much. I don't know, but for me, those were kind of just experimental and just filler episodes as I was starting to acquire a guest list to start asking people to come on the show. But I heard people, and it seems like this kind of forum where we're having just real conversations seems to be what people are interested in, and I like it too, because the reason I started a podcast wasn't about me necessarily. I want to hear from other people and make connections, talk to people like you, and hear some good stories. This to me is fun. Whether the podcast ever goes anywhere, I don't really care. I just want to use it as a vessel to continue to make great connections, and great connections tend to lead to really fun adventures, and you never know who you're going to end up on the mountain with, chasing critters, or in your case, traveling all the way to Alaska. So that's kind of how I feel about it, man. It's a constant evolution. Your videos now are going to be different than your videos in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point too, because especially on the theme of this, making videos or making podcasts, I think, like, I look back to my old videos, even from 6 months ago, before the internship, and I'm like, man, I can't believe I posted that. Like, I would never post a video like that, just because the quality wasn't as good as it is now. But it's funny, because now I look at my videos and I'm like, yeah, I think there's quality there, but I know that in another 6 months, I'm going to look back and I'll be like, I can't believe you were posting videos like that. Like, what were you doing, And I think that just speaks to the evolution of a person and that idea of quality, because that's always going to be changing. That's always going to be improving, hopefully. And just that ability to be flexible and to change a style, but also keeping your style, I think, is important. But yeah.
Absolutely, man. That's just like, it's fantastic stuff, man. I think it's fair to say that you're going to continue to do well, man. I'm going to say it now. You're the next generation of great, like, hunting content. So that's awesome. It's, talking about the adventures that you get to have doing what you're doing, which is probably part of your motivation, because who doesn't want to, at least what outdoorsman doesn't want to do it for a living? I know I would love to do it for a living. Unfortunately, I still have to go to my day job, which I shouldn't say that out loud. It's not unfortunately. I have a great and rewarding day job. And Sheriff, if you're listening to my podcast, don't fire me. I want to come to work tomorrow. But the adventures are part of it. Like I said, for me, it's having adventures with new friends, making friends, inspiring people. You got to have some really cool adventures with Clay. You guys went to Alaska, which is something I want to key in on because I absolutely love Alaska. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm ridiculously obsessed with Alaska. What you can't see in the screen right now in front of me and up on the wall behind my desk is a small caribou that I went and took up there in 2023. I'm obsessed with the state. If it was up to me, I would live in Alaska. My wife had other plans, but Idaho's amazing too, so I'm happy here. That being said, man, when you were up there, you got to follow Clay around some pretty wild places, and you got to meet another fairly well-known fella in the outdoor circle, especially in the Alaska outdoor circle. And if anyone watches the National Geographic show Life Below Zero, you might know who I'm talking about. He was one of the he's on several last seasons as Chevy Roach, and he and his family live in Bush, Alaska, and live off the land. Chevy, I know, is a born and raised Alaskan, and he was a really fun person to watch on the show. So anyways, man, not that it's about Chevy or Clay, it's about you, like I said, but cool people, man. And I'd love to hear about your Alaska adventure with Clay and Chevy.
Yeah, I think it was fair to say that was the most insane adventure I've been on to date. I will preface this with saying that if you haven't seen Clay's videos, go watch them first, because I've been given the green light to talk about it, but I don't want to spoil anything. Not that there's a bunch of secrets being hidden. Clay's a pretty open guy. But yeah, so Clay and I did 11 days on the river for his moose tag, and we were in Alaska for 30 days, or I think 26 days, the whole month of September, off just doing some fishing there in Anchorage, which was a blast in of itself. And then flew out to where Chevy lives, and pretty shortly thereafter, we took a boat up and spent 11 days on the river. And I think that's what we'll just talk about for now, at least. And that was by far I think every time you go on a big hunt like that, even if it's a 3-day hunt or even if sometimes it could be a day hunt, but especially those longer, week-long, 10-day hunts, your fundamental understanding of hunting drastically changes. And I definitely think that Alaska did that for me. And even looking back, like that first 7-day archery hunt I did with my brother for mule deer, like that we were talking about a bit ago, like that fundamentally changed my idea of hunting. But then doing 11 days with Clay, it's like my understanding of hunting shifted so much just because we experienced so much in that time. I think we left September 11th on that hunt and got back the 21st, I think, or sometime around there. And the moose rut was we were at we got to get in some really cool situations where we got to call some bulls in. Midway through the hunt, we actually called in a small bull, probably a 35-inch bull. I might be wrong on that. Clay's a lot better with judging the how wide a bull is than I am, but regardless of the fact of how big he wasn't legal, and so we called him in. When you're calling moose, you're making either cow calls, which is like a high-pitched or sometimes high-pitched longer sequence of calls, and then oftentimes you're just thrashing brush. You'll take like a moose shoulder blade and break it on willows and just trying to sound like a bull breaking brush, and then you'll also grunt and make bull grunts. And so we ended up calling a bull in, that small bull in, and he came all the way across this big open flat and came all the way in to probably under 10 yards at the closest. And I got to get some really cool video of that bull, and that's one of the things, with my passion for filming and then also my passion for hunting. Alaska is where I really got to go, I guess you could say, got to go crazy for capturing good quality video with a nice camera with high stakes, obviously, when you're in Alaska. But that day and that time we called that bull in specifically, got some really good video, with Clay and the bull in frame, and then obviously some close-ups. And so that bull came in and he just kind of stood there for a while. Those moose, man, like when they get rutted up, they don't have a fear of, it seems like they don't have a fear of humans, you could almost say, And so we were kind of like, that bull got so close to the point where we were kind of like, okay, let's be on our toes here, because if this thing decides to charge, like it could get a little western. And so eventually that bull where we called him in from that spot kind of went off. But after we sat there and messed around for a little while, We were headed back to the boat to drive back up to camp, and that bull had looped around back into the timber. And when I say timber, there's not much timber there. It's mostly willows, but you have those up along the riverbanks. You have the birches and some spruces, and so he was in there. And Clay looked ahead and spotted him up there about 100 yards. And so at that point, we weren't going to shoot him. We knew which bull it was, but we were just thinking, okay, let's see how close we can get while also keeping it safe. And so we walked all the way up to probably 20 yards from him, and he was just standing there, just staring at us. And I stayed back a little bit, and Clay walked up there and put his bow above his head, looking like a moose, and so he's swaying back and forth a little bit, and walked up, and he got all the way to probably under 10 yards again. And there was just a little birch tree between the bull and him. And Clay kind of just jumped and hit on that birch tree, jumped forward, and that kind of activated a little false charge from that bull. And so that bull ran forward. I don't know how close he was, but he was real close, probably 3 or 4 yards, maybe 5 yards, and then backed off, and looped around. But that was a really cool and also really adrenalating moment, because those big bulls up there, and that bull wasn't big, but just the body size on him, especially when you're 10 yards from them, is unbelievable. They're taller than we are. They're just huge animals, and I think we called 6 bulls in the whole trip, but just seeing those moose up there is unbelievable in Alaska.
Yeah, the moose in Alaska. For listeners that aren't aware, here in the lower 48, we have a species of moose that are called Shiras moose. Shiras moose. Sorry, I can't talk tonight. And they're huge. They're massive animals. I mean, they're bigger than anything else as far as deer species like elk, mule deer, whitetails, all that in the lower 48. But when you go up into a little bit more northern Canada and all over Alaska, the moose are Yukon moose. And Yukon moose they're a whole nother animal. The Yukon moose that I've seen, just the cows, make our Shiras bulls look silly. They're big animals. So I can only imagine experiencing it as close as you did. And I tell people all the time too. I'm listening to your story and I'm like, man, is Clay nuts? Because moose around here typically almost scare me more than lions and black bears. I think the only thing in North Idaho that makes me a little bit more wary, or absolutely makes me more wary than especially a mama moose, is a grizzly bear. So I can only imagine what you were feeling when you were watching Clay do that.
It was unbelievable, and you're totally right, because especially in the winter, I think this is really applicable to Alaska, and Chevy had talked to this as well. But those moose, they'll get on the snow machine trails, and they don't want to get off those things, because at least from my understanding, they don't want to get off those things because it's harder to walk through that snow, and when they're walking on the snow machine trail, it's packed down. And so they can be really dangerous, from what I've heard. At least I haven't experienced it, but yeah, when we called that bull in and Clay rushed at it, we cut in the final edit, we cut to a GoPro that was on Clay's head, because what the viewers didn't see is, man, I lost it when that bull came in. I didn't drop the camera, but I was filming it, had the camera up, and I took that camera down, and I just turned and ran and got behind a spruce, because I was like, Clay is a really tough and gritty guy, and I am not certain the balls he does, because I was a little shook up when that bull came in. I wasn't even as close to him as he was, but it was unbelievable. Yeah,
man, what an adventure. So going up to Alaska, what was your guys' logistics? Did you guys go up there and camp? Did you stay at Chevy's place, which you'll have to remind me the name of the river? I know it's something, Anoka, maybe.
Anoka River.
I'm sorry,
I might be saying that
Chevy,
wrong,
if you ever hear this. Yeah. We're both sorry, Chevy, if you ever hear it, this podcast, which I don't know that you will, but just in case, apologies for mispronouncing, with all respect.
I'll send it over to him,
man. Yeah. How was that, man? What did you guys... What was your living conditions like? Where were you staying?
Yeah, we had a really good situation up there. Chevy, I guess I'm probably allowed to say the name. Yeah, so he lives in Shagluk, Alaska. I think he said it in the video, anyways. And so it's a small village up there. I think there's 80 people that live in the village. I might be incorrect about that. But there was a separate building that we were able to stay in, and it was nice. We had I think the first couple days, I don't remember. I think there was cots in there. But we weren't roughing it for the first couple days, and then obviously on that hunt, that 11-day moose hunt, we were just in a tent. But we had a good setup for the rest of the time there, and we were lucky, honestly, because it's Alaska, and I was expecting to just be in a tent the whole time, but we were fortunate. And Chevy's obviously a really good dude and works. He's a freaking hardworking dude, and I think the Clay actually just posted a video on his channel that I edited, and it's just, I think it's titled like "What is life in Alaska really like?" And I think that video really speaks to Alaska itself, because in that one we're kind of just showing what life is like throughout the time we were there for the whole month. It starts off when we first get there, where Chevy was setting some nets for silver salmon, or no, not silver. Oh my goodness, Chevy's gonna kill me. Coho salmon? That's not what it was. Anyways, some kind of salmon. I'm not a salmon guy. But then by the time that video ends out, it was all the way in late September, and there was frost on the ground, and so that, for people that want to get a better sense of what life is like in Alaska, or what it might be like if you were to go there, I think that's a good video to watch, just because um, it really captures, like I said, it captures that full aspect of all the little things. Like, one of the things that Clay and Chevy did when we were up there was they were upgrading Chevy's solar power system. Oh my goodness, you might have to edit this out. Solar panel system, and um, one of the things that we did up
No
there was
worries, man.
Chevy and Clay upgraded his solar panel system up there. And there's a really cool shot that Clay got, actually, of Chevy, and he's just sifting through this big bin of nuts and bolts, and there's, I don't know how many screws and all kinds of stuff in there. But that was interesting to see too, because there isn't a hardware store, a grocery store. There isn't a place you can go to get something if you need it. If you need something done, you got to do it. In that video, one of the things Chevy said was, it's not an option to not hunt if you're living up there, because if you don't hunt, you're not going to eat, and you have to hunt. And at the end of the day, that's why Chevy, after we got back from our 11-day hunt, we hunted with Chevy with his bow, his traditional bow, for a few days. But at the end of the time there, on the last day of the season, Chevy pulled out a rifle and shot a small bull, because that is the reality of it there. If you don't get a moose, you might not eat that winter. And going back to the solar panels and stuff like that, when they were mounting them up there, he was just sifting through and found some bolts that happened to fit. And fit on there, and they were able to mount them. But that just speaks to the kind of lifestyle that Chevy lives up there, where it's all on you, and you have to be self-reliant, and it really is the realest way of living, you could almost say, or the most face-to-face way of living. I guess you could say that might not be a good way to put it, though.
No, I think it's a great way to put it, man. I think it adds some perspective, right? Because down here, we go hunting and I got to fill the freezer. Because I'm a nerd and a wannabe subsistence hunter, I put a lot of pressure on myself. Like, all right, man, I got to go fill all these tags because I got to fill the freezer. But the reality of it is, if Tom Walton doesn't fill his tags, then he just goes to Costco and stocks up, on beef at Costco, and life will go on. If I don't get an elk or I don't get a deer, I just enjoy the process of where my food comes from when I go hunting so much that I really try to supply most of my family's food via hunting and fishing. But I don't run into emergencies like starving all winter because, like I said, we got Costco. And down here, we have access to a lot of beef ranches, and it's not hard to do a little shopping and buy a quarter, half a beef, a whole beef. So we could fill our freezers easy enough. So I think that's a huge part of it. One of the things that was always fascinating about the show Life Below Zero is that lifestyle, and watching everybody that was on that show over the years, 20 some seasons, figuring out as they went. You have Chevy, Sue Aikens. I mean, talk about a lady that just comes up with crap on the fly, man. That lady could think up anything and just do it out there. And she always impressed me. And there was a lot of the other folks that were on the show that were the same way. I mean, I think that's quintessential Alaska. I know when I've been up there, man, you just see the ingenuity, Alaska ingenuity, everywhere you go. And another thing, and it sounds like this is what you experienced, and there's so much we could talk about with this. We could almost have done a whole episode. But when I've been to Alaska, a couple of times, one thing that I've experienced is, and you would think it might not be like this, but I've never experienced any ill will in Alaska. Like every Alaskan I've come across, and I have friends up there, and maybe that helped. But even when my wife and I have just gone up there, we went up in the dead of winter just to go to Alaska in the wintertime because we have considered moving up there. And every time we go, man, people are so overwhelmingly nice. You know, we've sat down in bars and made instant friends, had our meals paid for, our drinks bought. We've, you know, I remember one time we went to a glacier and we were just going to do the tourist thing and tour this glacier. And not only did the lady hold up the tour because we were running in there kind of late because it was like, look at that, let's go do it. The lady held up the tour and then was like, oh, are you, you know, it's just for Alaskans, it's this price. I'm like, I'm not an Alaskan. She's, you look like you could be Alaskan, whatever that meant. And she's like, well, how about veteran? And I was like, well, I'm a veteran. And so she held up the tour and made sure that I had a really nice, affordable discount to go on that tour. So we tipped really nice because, I mean, it just goes on and on and on, man. The people I've run into up there are just super helpful. I've never had any issues with Alaskans at all when I've traveled up there. The hospitality's always been pretty good, at least, especially out in rural Alaska. You know, I've not had any problems in town like Fairbanks or Anchorage, but rural Alaskans, man, I mean, just like rural folks down the lower 48, they're typically really good people. It's probably your experience, I would imagine, right?
Percent. Yeah. Chevy is an awesome dude for sure. He was making sure we were well fed, you know, eating on moose, eating on pike, and they were really welcoming for, you know, coming in and eating a couple meals in their house, or like I said, you know, being able to stay in a place with a roof over our head. And yeah, I think you said it in a very good way, because the people up there are truly some of the kindest people I've ever met, and the most hardworking.
Yeah, I think if you're not the government, you'll be safe, you know, which is kind of like North Idaho, right? So as long as you're not the government,
Yep.
you're safe.
Yeah.
And that's coming from the government, man. Trust me. Everyone's going to be like, I told you the government's out to get us. He said it. No, man. Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. And I kind of, you know, having not just watched Chevy on shows, but listened to him. He was on another Alaska podcast that I listened to. And I just got that sense from him. And yeah, that's fantastic, man. Well, it sounds like that was a really cool adventure, and I won't make you shed too many details because I think people need to go to your YouTube channel, to Clay's YouTube channel, and watch that along with some of the other adventures that you guys had gone on this year, because I think that's not the only traveling you did. So what other things are people going to be able to see that you guys did this year?
Yeah, that was certainly the biggest. And then we also got to do, you know, back in the summer, we got to really, I got to explore kind of some of the areas that were new to me. Obviously, they weren't new to Clay, but even some of those units, you know, I'm not going to name specific units, but just those central units going down into for scouting.
Good idea.
For some of Clay's. Yeah. For some of Clay's spots, you know, it's like I had never, you know, we did a late elk hunting, you know, down in 41 and stuff, but really had never explored the state beyond the Panhandle much. And, you know, I think that just goes to show, you know, like we people want to feel like a sense of home and belonging. And for me, that's going to be the Idaho Panhandle. You know, I'm going to live there for the rest of my life without a doubt. But I think still there is a fact of like Idaho is, in my opinion, one of the best states, you know, in the country. And there's so much ground and so much public land and so many different places to explore. And so being able to really see some new stuff and see some new country over the summer with Clay was really awesome. But then I think the next biggest, well, you know, actually almost forgot about that. We did go out to South Dakota as well for the pheasant opener. And that was really, really cool, because out there it's a whole experience, because, you know, it's just so different from here with there being no mountains and it's all flat, you know. And so Clay brought his flintlock muzzleloader out there, and his whole objective was to try to kill a pheasant on the wing with a muzzleloader, which, if people don't know about flintlocks, is very difficult to do, because, you know, when you're shooting a shotgun, you pull the trigger and with less than half a second, the BBs are there, and that's a dead bird. With a flintlock, you pull the trigger and it shoots a spark and ignites gunpowder that then sends through and shoots a pattern, and it's probably close to a second. I don't know exactly how long it takes, but a like noticeable amount of time before that, or those BBs get to the pheasant. And so if you don't have like perfect follow through and you're continuing to follow that bird, even when there's a big plume of smoke in your face, you're not going to hit it. And so out there, we were there, I think, for 4 or 5 days, and it took probably close to 15 shots before Clay was able to put a bird down, and it was freaking awesome because he had one of the better reactions I've seen him have when he did put a bird down. He was really fired up. I think he said the thing he said right after was, he says, "Man, I'm more excited right now than I am after I shoot a bull elk," and he certainly was. Because it was quite an accomplishment to get a pheasant with a flintlock. But then yeah, too, after that, Clay was super gracious, and he actually let me get on the gun for a little while, and so I pulled out a 16 gauge, and I was able to shoot my limit the next day. And that was a really unique experience too, because I've done some grouse hunting here in North Idaho, and never really too hardcore about it, but that whole bird hunting culture I am drawn to, because I think it's just a really cool aspect, and especially I think with the aspect of the dog and the hunter working together. I really would like to, and I eventually will get a dog for hunting. We haven't, growing up, we didn't have dogs because my dad was really allergic to them, and it just didn't work out for our family. But Clay's dog Cedar, he's a lab, and just seeing the way Cedar would work the pheasants, and then point when there was a bird, and then also seeing how Clay worked with Cedar and that communication between dog, even though it's not spoken, I think is just age old, and it's really cool. And I'm a dog person myself. I really enjoy dogs, and so that was my favorite part about that, was really just being able to see Cedar and the other dogs that were there with the other guys that were in camp work together, and it was awesome because those dogs get so excited, and sometimes they get a little too excited because sometimes they'll be on a bird, and if they run too far and that bird gets flushed up out of range, then you don't end up shooting it. So the whole idea there, at least from my understanding, is you're trying to keep your dog close within shotgun range so that when they flush birds, you can take a shot. But South Dakota was really cool, and that was new for me, and a really cool experience for sure.
Man, that's awesome. Well, I'm really excited to jump on YouTube and watch some of this stuff from both your guys' channels. It's nice to have some good fresh content out there from good, personally, I feel like you kind of get overwhelmed these days with a lot of the bigger shows, and there's just so much of it. And I just think that it's not all, doesn't just speak to me at that down to earth level. Right. And with you and Clay out there doing things that I do, and you guys, carry yourselves in ways that I like to, think I try to carry myself. And it's just cool to watch what you guys are doing. I'm excited for both you guys on those channels. So I'll definitely be tuning in, and I would highly suggest everybody else tune in. So again, what's your YouTube channel? Let's plug that real quick.
Yeah, my YouTube channel is called All Things Wild. Also, when I created the channel, I now realized that I should have chose a different name, because apparently it's a pretty popular name. So I may end up changing it to something a little differently that's a little more specific to me in the future. But you could probably just type in my name and then with All Things Wild, and you'll find it. But yeah, man, and Clay's already got a lot of that content out. That South Dakota video is already out on his channel. I guess since we're on the topic of relatability, let's talk about whitetails for a minute, can we?
Sure, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, when you said it, I think that's like a really cool important thing too, because, like when I go to YouTube, it's like, okay, I want to see people hunting around. I mean, like, it's cool to see, like you said, the big shows and all these, like, other states. And that, I think that has its place totally too, because sometimes you do want to experience something new through a video, but also I think it's fun just to see what's going on around you and something that you do. And so for a lot of people right now, I would assume there's a lot of folks out chasing whitetails. I don't know when this will go out, but today is, I think, the 17th. And so the whitetail rut is supposed to be kicked in. It's at least where I've been hunting, it's been really slow. I've been out 3 times for some like weekend type stuff in the last month maybe. And I guess this would have been 3 weeks ago. Actually, this was back when I was hunting with my trad bow, and I was actually able to have a pretty cool hunt. I think this was late October, so it would have been probably like the 25th or something. And a lot of people watching this probably have a pretty good understanding, or listening to this probably have a pretty good understanding of, how whitetails are during that time of the year. And especially out here in that, where I hunt them, at least, is in that kind of open, a lot of that Stimson stuff where you got, clear cuts, and obviously that they're not always clear cuts. There's a lot of ocean spray in there, and there's a lot of cover, but it's still pretty open country. And so when those whitetails are not in the rut and in that type of habitat when the rifle season is in, they're really spooky and they're really wary, and it can be a very difficult time to find big bucks or any deer for that matter, especially when you're around hunting pressure. I feel like when you get a little further in there, you can definitely get us into some good hunting. But the point of what I'm saying is I was going out with my bow, and so trying to get a deer with a traditional bow, stalking it in that kind of habitat, if I'm being honest, almost stupid hard. It's just one of those things that's probably never going to happen. Just because the difficulty to it. But regardless of that, I went out and felt like I wanted to give it a shot. And I was listening to another podcast, the Samong Gang Outdoors podcast. That's a really good one too. And Samong was talking about how with hunting pressure, I think like the whole idea is, I think you can think about it in a negative sense, or you can think about it in a positive sense, because I think of hunting. I am one of those people that I see another guy in my spot, and I totally, or not my spot. I shouldn't even say that. It's public land, but I see another person out there, and I sometimes get discouraged by that. But I think if you have the right mindset around it, it can actually be helpful for you, because what I ended up doing was, in the spot I was at, there was a lot of people, and the way they were hunting it was they were just guys on side-by-sides or ATVs, and they were taking those ATV trails up, and they would glass some roads. And so I thought, how can I use this to my advantage? So I ended up finding this little knob that you couldn't glass to from any roads, and you had to hike into. And sure enough, once I got to that knob and started looking a little bit, and then there were all the deer. And I probably throughout the whole weekend saw maybe 15 different deer, either moving through or using that knob as bedding or feeding. And so I ended up midway through the second day, I ended up spotting, what I would consider a nice buck. He wasn't big, just a 4x4, but especially given the circumstances of that hunt, he was a nice buck in my book, at least. And when I spotted him, he was on this slope on the kind of the downward south side of, or I guess no, that would have been the north side. I don't remember which side of the hill that was on, but he was on a hillside with a lot of cover. And it's it's open, but there's that ocean spray and a little bit of tamarack mixed in there. So if you're not looking closely, you're going to miss deer in there because they're so camouflaged. And so I was able to pick him out, and I ended up bedding him down in that spot. And I saw a route to get in, and I was like, you know what, let's go give it a shot. And so got above him, got the wind right, and I didn't have any expectations. I was like, if I get close, it'll be cool. If not, that's part of it. And got in, slipped in, and I was able to get to about 200 yards, and I ended up bumping two does that were probably bedded 50 yards from him, and they kind of jumped out and went into the open clear cut stuff, and I had to wait and probably just stayed there pinned down for 45 minutes until they left, and then obviously took my boots off and started really taking my time slipping down there. And the way this works is that whole knob where all these deer was you can't drive to it, but there is like a little logging road that's gated off that kind of goes around it. And so I was taking that road in to cut in towards where that buck was bedded. And then my plan was to drop off that road down through the ocean spray stuff to his bedding location. And I had it marked because there were these two patches of green, probably, I think they were hemlocks. And he was bedded right in the middle of them. But it was a thicker patch of hemlocks, and then it was open in between that, just with that, ocean spray stuff. And he was bedded right in between that. And so that was kind of my marker that I had for where I was going to stalk into, and got down towards where he was. And I just really started taking my time, and I had a really good wind. And on that particular day, the wind was blowing probably 7 to 10 miles an hour. So not crazy, but it had enough wind noise to where it was covering up a lot of those tiny little sounds. And so I snuck in, and I was using my phone with Onyx on it because I had, a pin marked, and I was just checking how far I was. And so got in, and I checked my phone when I left the road, but then I got probably halfway to where I thought the buck was, and I decided I would check my phone again, and it said 60 yards to where the buck was. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to put the phone away, and now we're just going to sneak in. And so at that point, I was moving, dang slow because that buck is gonna hear you if you make any noise. But it wasn't moving the slowness of like where you're taking 15 seconds for one step because he's 20 yards type of deal. So got in, and there was this other tiny skid road that was probably 50, maybe 30. I don't know. It was old and really overgrown, but you could still slip through it, and it was flat, and it didn't have quite as much cover or ground cover as just the hillside. So I was able to be a little more quiet on that. And my plan was that old skid road was going to go what I thought was about 20 yards above where he was bedded. And my plan was to shoot him off that really old skid road. And it's one of those roads where if you're just looking naked eye, it doesn't even look like there's a road there, and you can only really tell if you glass it and you can see the bank on the other side. Um, and so I was what I thought 60 yards from him, and I was like, I'm gonna peek over because if you look down the other side of the road, then you're gonna be able to get 30, 40 yard visibility just through the ocean spray down there. And got over to that to just walked over to the other side and peeked over. And sure enough, I looked over and he was bedded right there at 20, what turned out to be 21 yards, facing downhill with the wind in my face. And I was like, holy shit, like he's right there. And so I immediately ducked back down. And it was one of those moments where I didn't think through it enough, because if I had really took my time there and thought like, okay, how far is this actually? I would have been able to realize that's 21 yards. But I just had so much excitement because I didn't even think that I would ever be able to stalk that close to a deer in that season. And so my plan was, like the way that sets up is there's a road, that skid road I was on, but he's bedded still ahead of me. And so if I get directly above him on the skid road, I'll probably be 15 yards from him. And so my plan was to kind of walk that or sneak around a little closer to him and then shoot him off there at 15. And I ended up just, once you're that close, you do have to take, just an excruciating amount of time on your footsteps because, you're point blank on him right there. And it was one of those deals where I think I just broke a tiny little twig or something, and he busted out at probably 17 yards and jumped out, and I saw him, and it was, man, I was bummed because if I had been able to get around maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 more steps, I would have had a shot to embed it, and obviously would have waited for him to stand up. But the lesson for me on that one was I should have taken more time when I first saw him through that gap, because I went and I stood in his bed and I looked up and I, I ranged it there, and that was 21. And then I walked back around to that spot, and then it came to me, then it was like, yeah, that was obviously in range, but it was one of those things where you just, in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking about it. You're so excited that I kind of blew it off. I was like, that's too far. I got to get closer. And so if I had stayed there and he had stood up, I would have been able to shoot him right there. But regardless of that, it was an unbelievable encounter. And I ended up, I went back out this weekend and I ended up shooting another buck, probably about the same size with a rifle, just to put some meat in the freezer, as we've been talking about. But like whitetails, man, whether it's stalking them or whether it's in the rut, it's about as exciting as it gets for me, at least.
Heck yeah, man. I don't think a lot of people are going to be able to say that they snuck in that close to a white-tailed deer in any season, but especially the one that you just described. Obviously, I've been out hunting in the rifle season here in Idaho lately myself, and yeah, the deer are getting pretty spooky. Right now, you're kind of almost hoping that you're getting the bucks that are cruising so hard, they're just not paying attention. Otherwise, the does, man, those girls are like, they're on edge when they hear things because they've been getting shot at since October 10th. So it's been over a month that these deer have been getting chased by people with rifles. So they can get a little challenging. And I love talking about hunting pressure and how to use it to your advantage. While I'm not the most accomplished hunter, one thing that I kind of take a little bit of pride in is finding what I kind of just call hidden in plain sight spots. That's how I shot my doe on my doe tag up in Unit 1. And I don't mind saying which unit because it's a draw tag anyways. And there's a billion of those tags that they issued this year. They might not issue them so much next year for a number of reasons you're probably aware of, and disease and stuff that, that blue tongue and EHD hit hard up there this year. But, their tag was issued as like a CWD surveillance tag. But anyways, yeah, and that was a actually like a hidden in plain sight spot. I kind of talked about it on an earlier episode. And, I look for spots sometimes, as a work guy that's working and family and stuff. Sometimes I find spots where it's like, it might be right off a road. It might be not far from the trailhead where everybody walks by. Um, but, sometimes the lazy guys just drive right by those spots and don't want to get out and actually hunt it. There might be like a little terrain feature that's kind of makes it to where they're not interested, whether it's like you have to climb up a ridge or maybe some water feature or whatever. Maybe it's a opening in the timber that's just out of sight of the road. And then, on the opposite end of that is that like some of the guys that are more like us that are looking to get back there, right? So they might walk in the dark and walk right past that. And I've taken several deer in the fashion, and turkeys, man. I get a lot of turkeys after people walk by them. But I've gone in right at shooting light, set up on a spot that people walk by all the time, but I know there's deer in there. I see the sign. And, one morning before church a couple of years ago, I was like, I'm going to go out for a little hunt before I got to, come back home and go to church. And I did just that. Walked in at shooting light. I set up where I'd just been seeing a ton of deer sign. Not far from the trailhead, less than a mile. People walk by it every day, multiple times a day. But that time of morning, everyone's already back in at their. And so, sure enough, man, I didn't even make it to sunrise. It was, within minutes after legal shooting light that I shot a little buck as he was cruising past me on the road there. So, yeah, man, you just use hunting pressure to your advantage, right? And find your little pocket spots to go back to. But as far as stalking with a trad bow or any stalking and getting that close, man, I'm super impressed by that story. So nicely done.
Yeah. I think, I think you said it very well because, we were actually out, like I said, I shot that buck on Saturday, but then I was hunting with a buddy and we were trying to fill his tag and we were in the spot that I shot my buck in. And, that spot, like I do when I go into a new unit, and this unit where we were hunting, it was a new one. I hadn't ever, really hunted it before. The first thing I do when I go to a new unit is I look on, Onyx maps and I just look for, okay, what are the terrain features? Is there saddles? Is there good vantage points? And I think that is a good starting place, but you also got to realize that everybody else is probably also doing that. And so, I marked a bunch of spots for where I wanted to check out. And sure enough, Friday afternoon before that buddy came and met me, I went and checked all those spots. And wouldn't you know, in almost every one of those spots that I had marked, there was a truck. And then it's like, okay, well, if I'm marking all those spots because I think those are the good glassing spots, it's probably a good chance everybody else is also marking those spots. So like you said, sometimes you got to think, okay, if I was a deer, where would I be? But like, you got to look at it almost from the deer's perspective and less from the hunter's perspective, because a lot of times all those good looking spots are spots that have hunters in them. And so, whether it's a thicker timbered hillside that is a little steeper, or whether it's, like you said, one of those spots that people walk right past, or sometimes it is a spot where, you got to hike in 3-4 miles to get back in there, to where a lot of people aren't willing to hike into. Whatever it may be, getting way back in there, or just to a spot where there's not as many people can be productive for sure.
Absolutely, man. Well said. Got to think outside the box. Well, River, man, this has been just a really fun conversation. I've absolutely loved hearing your stories, all your adventures on your own, your adventures with Clay. And, I really hope that as you grow and we all watch you be successful, that maybe we'll get you back on the show a time or two to share some updates and, maybe just get to walk a little bit of this journey with you. If you would continue to humble yourself and come back, man, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thanks for having me on, and I've really enjoyed this conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. River Corcoran, everybody, North Idaho. You guys keep your eye on this young man. He is on fire. He's doing really cool things in the outdoors. I think you all, let alone myself, I think you all are going to see more of him. So until next time, I think, River, you are absolutely living the dream and pursuing freedom in the outdoors in every sense of the meaning. So thanks, buddy. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks again. And if this resonates with you, I want to welcome you to the tribe.
and encourage you to share this podcast with your friends. Hit subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Pursuing Freedom Outdoors. And if you or someone you know has a great story about life or the wilderness, I want to share it. You can shoot me a message on Instagram or email me with all inquiries and questions at thomas@pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com. That's Thomas, THOMAS, at pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com. Until next time, get out there, get after it, and pursue freedom in the outdoors. Before we get started, I want to thank our first partner, Response Ready Medical. Response Ready Medical, bringing our customers the best quality training and equipment for the worst case scenario. Response Ready Medical's vision is to be the leading provider of emergency preparedness solutions across the United States, empowering communities, organizations, and individuals to respond confidently and preserve life during critical moments. Offering same-day certification, all Response Ready Medical classes are instructed by nationally registered and state-licensed firefighter, paramedics, law enforcement officers, and hospital staff. Classes currently being offered by Response Ready Medical include CPR and AED, CPR, AED, and first aid, emergency trauma care, child and babysitting safety, CABS, backcountry medicine, and wilderness first aid. Your premium partner in emergency preparedness, Response Ready Medical.